Good evening, everyone. I hope you all had a fabulous weekend. Let's head right on into Collectively Rewilding. All right, here we are in Collectively Rewilding. And what do you guys think of the new messaging style? Do you like this better than the old, real basic
I like
messages?
it, Sabrina. For other
Yeah,
people like myself, I'm not really good with the time zones, so I think that's really cool that you did that.
we really hear that in Let's Go Help too, right? So I just thought, let's just put it right in the message. The time zone for each of the general time zones of the United States. There are at least I think it's only one more time zone. I think Hawaii fits in its own, but I think it's like 3 hours before Pacific is what I want to say, but I'm not certain. So, all right. So tonight we have some really good articles, as I said earlier, of Mother Earth News, February, March of 2025. And I decided to do that because I did read through, I think, some of this at least. And that was a year ago, though. And then I quit reading the Mother Earth News because we were reading so much of the Gardenary. But I think we're going to go back to the more diverse style. And I really wanted to start with this one because it has three articles that really speak to what people in our community are either wanting to do or are dealing with. And so the first article that we'll read will be for Miss Tammy because she did show up first. And it is Grow in Dry Climate. Tips, Tips for Selecting Desert Hardy Vegetables by Maureen Gilmer. Earth's climate is in a perpetual state of change. We're either cooling on our way toward another ice age or warming up from a previous one. On a smaller scale, farmers know that every year will be slightly different depending on the constellations of rain and temperature. With so much change going on, plants must be equipped with genes that allow them to change with the Earth's climate. From this large gene pool came many characteristics that define the contemporary garden vegetables we know today. For centuries, farmers and plant breeders have been selecting seeds of individual plants to improve the quality of their crops. The chosen plants may have larger yields, larger fruits, greater yields, improved disease resistance, a different growth habit, or enhanced flavor. The places these changes took the places where these changes took place tell us much about what the farmer was seeking to better cope with in local environment conditions. Okay, that didn't read quite right. But anyway, let's just move on. They're saying basically, if somebody modified something for India, it's going to be much different than something modified for England, right? Two extraordinarily different climates, right? And so when you look at where that plant was hybridized, it's not GMO stuff, but it's selecting plants specifically for certain characteristics. And actually, M.I. Gardner had a good video on it. Let me see if I can find that for you guys really quickly, and I will just put that up because it does get a little bit confusing. And he talks about walking through the hybridization process. Okay, so we're looking for M.I. Gardner selecting plant for, see if that'll pull it up. Yes. Okay. So 3 steps for selecting plants for seed saving, right? And he is doing that. He's done that. He has his own seeds and he's deliberately grown like this squash that he talks about here in this video. All right. So I will grab that link and share that for you guys in Yarn Yard for Tall Tales so that you can watch that to see what it looks like to more naturally work towards a better plant for your area, right? All right. Really interesting video. So you guys can check that out. All right, now back to our article. But that is what they're talking about. So somebody that's in England is going to have to take something like a tomato. In fact, I think they talk about that maybe in here. I believe it. Okay, let's just wait and read the article because I'm going to start talking about something they're going to talk later, I think. Know your terms. Landrace. This was a new term to me. Landrace cultivars were developed by farmers and gardeners around the world and are super adapted to the local microclimate. If a farmer ceases to replant a landrace, it'll vanish from existence when the last viable seed dies. Hybrids are the result of two species that cross-pollinate naturally and are cross-bred artificially by plant breeders. The seed produced from this cross will carry some genetic characteristics of either parent with highly variable results. Seeds of hybrid plants can be sterile, depending on how you go about it. Heirloom is a term of affection for an old cultivar or landrace still in cultivation and thus available to buy from seed. The trend toward growing heirlooms helps keep plants in continuous cultivation, which is the only way to preserve those plants' unique genetic characteristics for posterity. How vegetable cultivars differ. Just because a plant is an heirloom doesn't make it better. In fact, planting the wrong heirloom can be a total disaster when it's not adapted to your garden or climate. To understand how the world of heirloom plants works, let's look at tomatoes as an example. This vegetable was native to Central and South America, and therefore genetically equipped to perform well in hot climates. When it was grown in Northern Europe or Britain, the cooler summer, rainfall, and shorter growing season didn't allow enough time for the fruits to fully ripen. In the farms of this region, landraces evolved that fruited earlier under cooler conditions. Some of these evolved into named cultivars with better adaptation to summer rain, humidity, lower temperatures, and short seasons. These heirlooms won't grow well in the desert or in drought or dry times because they aren't adapted to growing in arid conditions and may demand more water than standard commercial cultivars, particularly in hot climates. Similarly, the original tomato evolved elsewhere in the world. Farmers in northern Africa and the Middle East had droughty conditions and extreme heat. In these regions, the farmers selected the most vigorous plants to create their land races, and these produced some of the most desert-hardy plants possible. These heirlooms may not crack in high UV sunlight. They may be genetically programmed for growing with less water, and their leaves may be smaller to lose less moisture in extreme low humidity and wind. Pick cultivars for desert, drought, and dry times. There are many characteristics unique to each vegetable cultivar, both modern and heirloom. It's important to know what to look for when selecting them for low-water gardens and for the rigors of desert climates. Vegetable cultivars are defined by their region of origin. Some cultivars are developments by science for nations to improve food production and reduce famine. Knowing the names of these countries of origin or regions where breeders hoped to improve agriculture can help you zero in on a cultivar strictly by its designated climate preference. Selecting vegetables that originate in climates similar to yours will be your first requirement for success. These plants are also ideal for foodies who delve into the unique dishes of distant lands where their endemic cultivars lend a particular character to their flavors. For example, Middle Eastern cuisine uses less sweet tomatoes, and unless you grow them, your dishes may not quite be the same. This is something important to immigrants and second generations who are trying to preserve their heritage and may seek out such plants to assist in maintaining this culinary inheritance. When growing vegetables with as little water as possible, success depends on selecting the right cultivars naturally adapted to withstand minimal humidity. The world is full of little-known private landrace strains of common vegetables that maintain an edge over garden cultivars. You'll soon realize how important more lengthy descriptions can be to discovering the stalwart strains that are so different from cool, moisture-loving versions of the very same vegetable. The real rewards come when you find a whole new kind of vegetable to grow, one that may be little known outside isolated desert vegetables or villages. This will make you an integral part of a collective effort to expand diversity and support sustainable agriculture through continuous cultivation of a vanishing heritage. Tips for growing in dry climates. In an arid climate, the most challenging aspect of growing vegetables is getting them started. Whether you sow directly in ground or start your seeds ahead of time indoors, they all must eventually face the heat, wind, and low humidity. Well-started plants produce larger root systems better able to withstand the rigors of weather. Any plant not at the peak of health becomes more vulnerable in the low-water garden or in the extremes of the desert. The old expression rings true: a garden well begun is indeed half done. Divide the season in two. Where the growing season is shorter, such as high and dry communities of the Rockies and Sierra Nevadas, vegetables may fail to ripen properly before the first frost comes. If they do ripen, there's often no time for a second or third picking. Vegetables with a long lifespan that produce their crops over many consecutive weeks rather than all at once won't have time to reach their full potential. Starting long lifespan vegetables, such as tomatoes, weeks ahead of time in the warmth of a greenhouse or indoors will help them ripen their first fruits earlier and allow more time for additional yield. In the desert, the growing season is split by a brutal midsummer dormant season and a second spring, falls in late September. Here, crops produce very early, then some hunker down for summer and start up again in early fall. Others simply die in the heat. In the first season, tomato seedlings are planted out in late January or early February in the low desert, meaning you specifically, Tammy. I wouldn't want to do that in the high desert. The earlier these plants get started, the earlier their harvest begins, since its duration will be terminated by the soaring temperatures of desert summer. New tomato plants can be started indoors during the heat of summer to plant out fresh in fall. In the high desert, here where I'm at in Utah, there's also a split in the season, but with later spring frost starting early extends the season, increasing pre-summer yield before high temperatures interfere with flowering. Here too, new plants can go out in fall to produce well into the holidays. Perhaps. Control moisture levels. The first few days after germination are the most vulnerable in the life of a vegetable plant. Out in the garden, it can be difficult to maintain steady moisture levels in dry conditions where temperatures fluctuate radically. Hot days literally suck moisture out of the plant tissues and the soil at a startling rate. It can be nearly impossible to keep seedlings moist enough. For this reason, starting plants indoors or in a greenhouse is the best way to nurse them through those first days in an evenly moist environment. Even indoors, in low humidity climates, you may need further enclosure so the moisture in the soil actually humidifies the air around each plant. A simple solution is to keep your seedling pots in a deeper box and attach a clear sheet of plastic or glass over the top for a miniature indoor greenhouse. After plants germinate, open the top each day for a few minutes to freshen the air. Open the top for a bit longer each day to harden plants off to drier conditions gradually. To water the plants, pour tepid water into the bottom of the container and the pots will wick up the moisture. This will prevent dislodging the seeds or tiny roots, which might happen when you apply water from the surface. When seedlings become too large, leave the cover open or cut off the lid. Finally, move the containers outdoors during the day in a sheltered location to stimulate growth and help them adapt to wind before finally planting out in the garden. Problems with store-bought seedlings. While buying potted seedlings can speed up or simplify your planting process, it's not always the best way to go. Here's why. Diversity. Seedlings sold in chain stores are usually the most common, general-purpose vegetable cultivars with few heirlooms. The only way to grow specialized cultivars for a drought-resistant garden is to start them from seed yourself. Acclimation. Seedlings grown in large greenhouses with softened lighting, humid air, and specialized irrigation aren't ready to inhabit a low-water garden. When sold in the desert, you may notice that all the seedlings are kept under shade cloth or even under a solid overhang structure to protect them from the elements. The younger seedlings will require a more gradual period to acclimate to your home garden, so they're not stressed by the sudden shift from optimal greenhouses or full shade to hot inland valley or desert with extreme UV levels. All right, so did you hear anything that was interesting to you, Miss Tammy?
Uh, I'm just listening. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm uh cleaning my greenhouse while I'm listening to you at the same time.
right.
So I'm listening to you, Brita.
Well, there
Yeah.
at the
So
end, it really talked about like
about the
when you're
tomato.
getting your plants from Home Depot and stuff, if you want to put them outside, it really gave you that
Yeah.
step-by-step process to make sure that they do good. But you do pretty well with that already. So it's just an overall thing to think about if you guys are
Yeah.
starting to start growing from seed, not just growing general, growing those that are adapted to your climate, and you'll have more success, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm also like trying to buy the ones from, they're, in your grocery store you have like they're
Right.
hydroponic, herbs
But those are just going to
and
be
things.
the general cultivars like they're talking about. It's not, unless you're in
Yeah.
like mom and pop garden store or I can't think of the other terms right now, but one of those types of shops, they might have seeds like that. But when you just go to Home Depot or you go to Lowe's or you go even to the grocery
Oh,
store or the
okay.
Dollar Tree, right? Those are not going to be specialized for your
Yeah.
area. And
Yeah,
that's
they
what it's
end up,
talking about.
I don't know.
Say it again.
Some people, they kind of start like some people plants kind of stuff because they're not activated to like they're in the store and there's some lights and when I come into my backyard, it's
Mm-hmm.
like okay,
Oh, and you muted. I'm guessing the dogs got loud, but yeah, exactly. All right, and so now this one is for Benny, and she might have just cut off entirely. I think she did. Her internet just went out on her. It was getting all spotty right there, right? Oh, maybe she's back. Yes, she is. Okay. So the next article here is for Benny.
sorry.
You're good. You're good. No worries. Don't worry about it. We figured it all out. All right. So now, protect pollinator habitat. Do your part to save the bees by Doug Ottinger. Whether we live in a rural whether we live a rural lifestyle, an urban one, or something in between, our existence and that of the world as we know it depends on an ecosystem of small pollinators and native pollinator habitat that most people rarely notice. Approximately 35% of food crops and 90% of wild plants in the world are dependent on animal pollination. While the common European honeybee, Apis mellifera, has become one of the primary pollinators of domesticated food crops, it makes up only a small portion of the bee species and other insect pollinators in the world. Worldwide, there are some 20,000 species of wild bees. North America is home to almost 4,000 of those species. When any of those species becomes extinct, we've lost an entire link in our Earth's ecology. The power of pollinators. Multiple species of pollinating insects are necessary for our ecosystem to flourish because not all plants can be effectively pollinated by the same types of insects. Before the European honeybee was introduced to the Western world, native bees and other insects were prevalent and effective in pollinating wild plants and the crops grown by Native Americans. Some native bees can fly in colder or damper conditions than common honeybees can handle, enabling the pollination of fruit blossoms and other plants under inclement conditions. Other species are better adapted to hot, dry regions. For hundreds of years, squash and pumpkins grown by Native Americans were pollinated by species of small, solitary, ground-dwelling bees, commonly known as squash bees. Tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants are pollinated more effectively by bumblebees, which perform vibration pollination. Some flowers are too small for honeybees to enter, or the pistil and stamen configurations are difficult for the honeybees to access. These types of flowers are better serviced by other insect species that have evolved with the plants. In some cases, symbiotic relationships between insects make pollination possible. In certain species of lupine, the bumblebee's large size springs the blossoms permanently open. After this, smaller species of wild bees gain access and pollinate the plant. Many pollinators are in trouble. Many species of pollinators, both wild and domestic, are critically endangered. More than a quarter of North American bumblebees are currently facing extinction. Even the world of domestic beekeeping isn't exempt from these problems. Commercial beekeepers are losing entire colonies of bees to a disease broadly termed colony collapse disorder, which still isn't well understood. In some areas of the world, pears and other fruits are being pollinated by hand because of the loss of native pollinators. A significant factor in this decline is the loss of habitat. Urbanization and paving over of native pollinator habitat is one part of this. Large-scale agricultural practices are another. Native flowering plants, which provide food for insects, are being destroyed. Ditches are mowed and sprayed. Burrows made by ground-dwelling native bees are plowed under. Even so-called urban green zones, which often consist of large swaths of beautiful lawns and trees, may be nothing more than food deserts. Few native pollinator plants remain, and any domestic flowers planted are insufficient to support sizable insect populations or allow them to reproduce. Widespread pesticide use has also taken a toll. Certain pesticides used in agriculture and horticulture, including systemic pesticides, can harm bees exposed through pollen, nectar, water, and air. Even sublethal doses can reduce queen production, colony size, foraging ability, and learning ability, as well as make bees more susceptible to diseases. To address this, consumers can choose pollinator-friendly ornamental plants at nurseries, or ask local growers and nurseries which pesticides they applied to their plants. Finally, disease is another factor researchers are considering as they study pollinator decline. Bees may face any of the above factors in combination, which is why identifying a single cause or solution for decline is difficult. There's a little inset, and it says, best plants for bees. These 10 flowering plants seem to do well across a broad spectrum of regions. By cultivating these pollinator-friendly plants on your property, you'll create a haven for native pollinators. Be sure to check your local plant guidelines to choose wild species that are native and non-invasive in your region. Goldenrod, yarrow, sunflower, bee balm, columbine, California poppy, lupine, chokecherry, brambleberries, and wild rose. Build native pollinator habitat. According to Sarah Foltz Jordan, Senior Pollinator and Habitat Restoration Specialist for the Great Lakes chapter of the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, wildflowers are essential for pollinator food. Providing nesting and overwintering shelter for these insects is crucially important. We can't just cut it down to look pretty. We've got to leave it there so that they can shelter in those plants. Leaving wildflower stems and seed heads intact over winter is imperative to this. Dead wildflower stems are an important nesting habitat for about 30% of our native bees. Pruning stems back 6 to 18 inches in spring will result in stubble providing homes for the bees. It may look unsightly, but green vegetation will soon cover the area. Leaving out an old log or two is another advantage you can give beneficial insects such as ground beetles, fireflies, and native pollinators. Decaying logs are home to many of these creatures. Drill a few small, horizontal holes a few inches deep into each log as starter homes for these insects. Leaving soil undisturbed as much as possible will give native pollinators an advantage. Bare patches in lawns are excellent nest sites for ground nesting bees. Mulching, which is often touted as eco-friendly, isn't so friendly to some beneficial insects. Many native bees are solitary ground nesters. Mulching, especially with plastic, landscaping fabric, or hefty wood chips, may cover their burrow entrances and limit their ability to find nest sites. Leaving as many native flowers as possible when planting for bees, sow wildflowers and native pollinator plants. Use species native to the region in which you live. Native pollinators are more adapted to the plant species they've evolved with. Finally, cultivate a series of plants that'll provide blooms and food for these insects throughout the entire season. And we talked about that in a previous class, Benny. And so, any thoughts for you in there? When you're thinking about pollinators, are you thinking about wild bees as well? Or are you thinking primarily about honeybees and butterflies? And let's check out the chat here in case he's not able to talk tonight. Okay, he may not be able to chat with us either, but we'll keep an eye on the chat just in case. And now, though Candace isn't here, I have a great article for him as well. I can't remember I think he said he ordered like 15 different trees, and I think 2 of them were pawpaws. And so, power to the pawpaw seeds. Patience is key to producing these much-beloved native fruit trees. Story and photos by Andrew Weedman. If you live in eastern North America, from southern Ontario to northern Florida, and as far west as Nebraska, you've likely been hearing lots of buzz about foraging pawpaws. You might even know of someone who has a pawpaw patch of their own. My son's friend still talks about the day they met the Pawpaw Wizard, a bearded older gentleman gathering pawpaws and handing them out to anyone hiking through. But what the heck is a pawpaw anyway? The word pawpaw acts a bit like a club pin, a cryptic handshake, or more appropriately, a secret password. Say it in conversation, and you'll either get a knowing look, an instant conversation, or a bewildered, "Say what now?" Practically speaking, a pawpaw is a large, green-skinned fruit with cream-colored to bright yellow, soft, pulpy flesh, and 8 to 10 large, hard seeds per fruit. The pulp tastes a lot like a ripe banana mixed with a mango or muskmelon, and even with a hint of vanilla or nutmeg. If you get the chance to sample one, don't eat the skin or seeds. The skin is tough, leathery, and bitter tasting, and both contain some toxic compounds. The flesh, however, is safe to eat and is a major source of vitamin C, magnesium, iron, manganese, and a suite of other minerals. An ancient fruit. Pawpaws are North America's largest native tree fruit, a northern member of an otherwise tropical family, and an Ice Age survivor that no doubt misses the mammoth. We can thank Indigenous Americans for preserving and spreading this unusual fruit. Pawpaws were and remain a culturally important food to many Indigenous peoples today. For example, a word I can't even begin to pronounce, the Shawnee name for the fruit translates to Pawpaw moon, signifying the time in September when the fruit is gathered. And that's an inset from Mother Earth News there about the Shawnee name. But what do Ice Age mammoths and ground sloths and mastodons have to do with pawpaws in the first place? In a word, poop. Okay, I admit, that's oversimplifying things a bit. Large browsing mammals would ingest the fruit whole and later pass the seeds in large piles of dung. These piles provided fertilizer and kept the seeds moist. A pawpaw seed has 3 requirements to germinate successfully. It needs plenty of time, it can't freeze, and it absolutely can't dry out. Even one day of dry conditions drops the germination rate by 80% or more. So how does one go about planting a pawpaw grove? You can buy trees, but they can be expensive and have a delicate taproot, and you'll need at least 2 for pollination. If you find a wild pawpaw grove or know someone with a grove of their own, you can start your own trees from seed. And I promise, you won't need a steaming pile of pachyderm poop. Prepare your seeds. First, gather or otherwise source some ripe pawpaws. I sourced mine from trees planted at a historic park near me. I sampled the fruit of each and collected several from the one with the best flavor, melon and banana, ignoring the other, faintly bitter. To be honest, the parentage qualities aren't that terribly important, but it never hurts to select from the tree you like best. Now, this is the messy part. No, it doesn't involve dung. Remove the seeds from the fruit by cutting the skin lengthwise and tearing the fruit in half. Scoop the pulp and seeds out of the skin and work the seeds out of the pulp. Save the pulp for later. You can make a killer pawpaw banana bread with it. Each seed is large, black, and shiny, wrapped in a thick membrane. Work the membrane off the seed. Collect a dozen or so large, well-formed seeds from several fruits from a single tree or several different trees. While you clean the seeds, soak sphagnum moss in a tub of warm water so it'll be well hydrated for storing seeds. Once the seeds are clean, pack them in damp sphagnum moss in a zip-closed bag and store for an extended period in cool temperatures. Not freezing though, right? The sphagnum serves 2 purposes. It keeps the seed moist, preventing dry out, and because it's naturally mold resistant, it helps prevent mold formation in long-term storage. Write the date on the bag and place it in a refrigerator. Make the note on your calendar for March or April and then forget about them for 70 to 100 days while they cold stratify. This fridge time will allow the seeds to break from dormancy and get ready to germinate. Spring forward, grow seeds. In early spring, when the calendar reminds you it's time to pot up the seeds, start checking them in the fridge every now and then. They'll sprout in the fridge if you leave them there too long. If they do, just be extra careful handling each seed as you place it in a pot. If the root snaps, that seed is ruined and won't grow into a tree. I like to use tree pots, a special kind of pot that's 4 by 4 by 16 inches and designed to provide plenty of taproot growth without using a ridiculous amount of potting mix. They also fit quite nicely in square cat litter buckets to be sure to drill drainage holes into the bucket. The tree pots won't, however, stand upright on their own. You can also use nursery pots or 2-liter soda bottles with the bottlenecks cut off and drainage holes added to the bottom. Don't use plastic solo cups or anything shallower than 14 inches deep. Fill each pot with moistened potting mix to within 2 inches of the top. Place 2 to 4 seeds on top of the soil and then fill the pot the rest of the way with more mix. Each pot will provide 1 tree at planting time. The extra seeds are for insurance. If you're feeling confident, you can plant a single seed in each pot. That's up to your judgment. I like to tamp down the soil a few times to improve contact with the seeds and then water well. Store the planted pots in a cool, dark, frost-free place until you move your other garden transplants outside for hardening off in a month or so. Place your pawpaw pots somewhere sheltered with morning sun and late afternoon shade where they can spend the entire growing season. Waiting is the hardest part. This next phase might be the hardest part of the entire process. Remember to water the plants regularly while waiting a ridiculous amount of time for growth to happen. Above the surface, nothing will occur for the next several months. While out of sight beneath the soil, the seeds will be quietly growing impressive taproots. By mid-June, I guarantee you'll be ready to give up, certain the seeds were no good. Hang in there. Good things are coming. Sometime around mid-July, the seedlings will finally break the soil's surface, forming an understated little shepherd's crook of a plant with 2 little purplish leaves at the very tip, which will be followed by a few more leaves. Those are your future pawpaw trees. Keep the soil moist but not wet through summer. You may need to water more often in the hottest, driest part of summer. I've started pawpaw trees from seed twice now. When I started them for myself, I planted them in their final places that autumn, about the time rainfalls had begun in late September. Because space is limited in my backyard orchard, I planted 2 trees in a single footprint, meaning they're about 2 feet from each other, their branches intertwining. When I planted them, I thinned each pot to a single tree by snipping the extra trees off at ground level. I then dug a wide hole deep enough to accommodate the deep taproots of the seedlings. Pawpaws don't like having their roots handled more than necessary, so try not to knock the soil from the roots as you slip them out of the pots and into the planting hole. Space them about 2 feet apart and backfill the native soil you dug out of the hole. Water them in well. The second time I started pawpaws from seed, it was for friends and my wife's coworkers. In the interest of supplying larger, stronger trees, I kept them in the pots for an extra year. In winter, I stored them in the back entrance of our cellar under a metal exterior door, along with my potted figs and grafted apple trees. The temperatures in the stairwell stay cold but above freezing throughout my Zone 6A Pennsylvania winter. I watered the pots every few weeks through winter. The next spring, I treated them the same way as any other potted plant, watering them as needed and providing them with afternoon shade. For their first year in the ground, I provided water regularly whenever the weather failed to supply at least an inch of rain in a week. To protect against voles, rabbits, and string trimmers, I placed trunk collars made of slit 4-inch black corrugated plastic drain pipe around each trunk. They grew strong and quickly, flowering and producing a few fruits within 3 years. 4 years later, my pawpaw crops continue to increase steadily. All right, so very interesting. Myself, I do not like bananas, so it wouldn't really be a tree that I would have a lot of interest in, but my husband and our children do love bananas, and I'm sure they would love it. However, it doesn't really do well over here. As I said, it ends at Nebraska, right? And so all the way up to the top of Florida, I would guess would mean, I'm not sure what. Let's look at a map. Well, not podcasty, but we need this one here. Map. You just need a super basic one. This one's a little more visibly appropriate for our purposes right now, I think. Okay. And so we're down here, and it said from the tip of Florida, or the top of Florida. So that does leave most of the southern states good then. Perhaps down lower in Texas, right? It might not. The little panhandly like shapes on Mississippi and Alabama, perhaps not. From Baton Rouge and further south, maybe not in Louisiana, right? But then all the way up through Nebraska and over, something like that. All of that can grow pawpaws. And so that is a good large region of the United States that can grow that particular fruit. Very interesting. Any thoughts, Gaia?
Wait, does that include Georgia? I just
Yes. Oh, yeah, you popped in. That one was all for you, Kendez. Um, when did you happen to pop in?
like maybe 30 seconds ago.
Okay, so you're going to want to watch this again because we read a whole article about pawpaws for you, right? You're getting two pawpaws in the 15 trees that you ordered. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so it says be extremely careful with the taproot when you're dealing with it and planting it.
Mm. Okay.
But it's out there, and we read it for you, and you can watch that. I'll post it this evening, and so you can watch it whenever you have the time. We also did pollinators for Benny and dry climate growing for Tammy and I. And it was neat because they talked about the low desert. Tammy's like in the high desert as well, but for her area, but it's still low because she's so close to sea level. It's quite different than what we experience over here at the foothills of the Rockies, right? As a high desert. And
Cool.
so very interesting. And then a pollinator friendly article, while it was for Benny, really is truly for all of us. And so I would encourage you all to think about native plantings and thinking about your wild bees, bumblebees, and all of these beautiful critters. And that article did such a nice job of telling you that the rotting log is where ground beetles and dragonflies, and I can't remember the other happy little critter that are benefiting from just a log that's just sit out there to rot in your yard until it falls itself into soil. And then you'd want to get another log, right? And doing some of these things, having small patches of bare soil. And I saw that this fall. And we have a lot of wasps. It's this unusual hybridized wasp. It did this naturally. Two wasp species interbred and created this new hybridized wasp. And I believe that was a lot of what was nesting in our front yard, where we got most of the grass to come back, but not in a couple of big patches. And there were so many holes in that from bugs. And I'm sure it helped to aerate our soil. And so bugs don't just pollinate, they aerate our soil, they work through stages of the decomposition, whether you're talking about plants or trash or decaying bodies of animals, or, you know, all of the bodies that decompose, we do all at some point return to soil. All of those bugs are necessary, even the ones that we just can't stand, like mosquitoes and gnats. Those are hugely important as food sources for birds. And spiders, of course, are very important as well. They keep other bugs in check. And so then there are the spiders that hunt instead of webs, and they a lot of times eat the other spiders. So it's all this big, beautiful woven tapestry that we're really only truly beginning to be able to quantify and label and describe and explain to the depth that we have now. Now, you can go back to some of the ancients' writings and see a lot of things that they're only now rediscovering did actually have validity, but they've been denied for thousands of years in many cases, right? And so we are given a short period to try to understand the complexity of the world around us. And so we'll never probably fully understand all of the things that take place amongst all of the different animals, insects, soil microbes, all of these different elements of an environment. And so, really trying to look at what nature is in our areas and bring as much of that into our own spaces as possible is so beneficial for all of these critters that we need to keep having the world that we have. I know I say this over and over again, but I just hope it percolates out into the outer world. Those who decry environmentalism, environmentalism is at its heart a truly human centered activity. In all likelihood, if we killed off everything that we know of and think of as life here on this planet, there would be things that survived, and then an entirely new ecosystem would build up around that. But we wouldn't probably be able to make that transition. And so to save the planet is to save the people, is to save the planet, is to save the people. We coexist together, and we suffer devastation and degradation to our natural world within ourselves as well. And so that pollinator article, while yes, Benny is specifically planting a large pollinator garden, anywhere any of us can get that out there and get that in is wonderful. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump into our calendar. And we will be back tomorrow evening for Plan Your Wild workshop. And that is going to be at 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 5 o'clock p.m. Mountain, 6 o'clock p.m. Central, and 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you all there, and I hope you all have a wonderful end to your weekend. Please feel free to unmute everyone and say good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you guys as well. Let me just check. I forgot to check about Benny's situation here. Doesn't look like he's ended up saying anything about the article. You hate bananas, gross. I do not like them either, Tammy. They're just a little much for me. All right, guys. Thank you all. Bye, everyone.
Bye.